should. Are we
There's
good?
actually people here.
Yeah, I know.
It matters.
Yeah. So we're good? Okay.
We're sharing.
What? Yes, we're sharing. So we started, we exited, and now we're back. We reconvened. So for all those people who are watching at home, waiting for us, we're back. So before we move forward, I did not have people before here, so the fire exits are in the back and off to my left. So, we are now at public comments. So I don't know, Mr. Provenzano, if you want to put the slide up. Just a reminder, if you are public speaking, that you'll have 3 minutes. We will have a timer. I'll remind you when it's time to stop. Also, just remember that we don't want people's names used because that's the rule. Don't think anybody's going to be shouting or anything along those lines, but I think Mr. Provenzano is going to put the slide up. So
I'm having technical
I
difficulties
know.
with this computer.
Word Docs is cranky too.
It is very
really
cranky.
kept kicking.
So I'll read your name and you'll come up to the podium. We'll let you get situated and then we will start the timer. I also just wanted to mention that during public comment, if you haven't been here before, it's a time for you to talk to us as a board, but we don't respond. So we'll be taking notes. You are more than welcome to email us after the fact as well. Additionally, we're going to be here for a while after public comments. And I know that in Superintendent Provenzano's report, he is going to talk about some of the things that I believe you are here to talk about. So I would highly recommend people that are here today to stick around at least through the communications portion because we will be talking about some of those things. And of course, if you work for the district or live in the district, we'll be going over the budget. Again, very important. We tend to get a lot of questions and, we want to make sure that people are getting the information. So
Exciting time.
very exciting. Okay. So our first person will not be with us, but I'm going to ask Carrie Brewer to come up to the podium. Hi. And just let us know when you're ready and we'll start the clock.
And if you press the button, it should be green.
Push the one that says push.
Yeah.
Okay, it's green. Oh, and I'm on a mic now. Okay, I'm ready whenever you are. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Brewer, and I live at 75 Huxley Way. I'm the parent of an incoming kindergartner, and I've come to talk to you today about the use of iPads in kindergarten and the lower elementary grades. I'm currently an assistant professor and the department chair of the Computing Sciences Department at Finger Lakes Community College. But actually, I started my educational career 20 years ago when Dave Paddock hired me to teach math and computer science right here at Fairport High School. So once a Raider, always a Raider. Hi, everybody. I share those credentials to emphasize my interest in and experience with teaching various technologies and also helping learners, as well as my colleagues and my family, navigate the ever-changing technological landscape. It is precisely because of what I know of technology and how people develop technological skills that I have made a conscious decision to raise my son with very limited screen time. It can be a controversial topic because as parents, we are all just doing the best that we can. School systems also make the best decisions they can with the data that they have. But I know I'm not the only person who has chosen minimal screen use because there's more and more data coming out on the drawbacks of screens for everyone, but especially young children. Over the course of my teaching career, I've actually witnessed a decline in students' computer skills because using a desktop computer or a laptop is very different than using a device like an iPad or a Chromebook. Using those devices doesn't actually prepare our students to work on a real computer. Other skills required to be a successful computer programmer include creativity, logical thinking, problem solving, perseverance. And now that we find ourselves in the age of AI, I would argue that the most important skills we should be helping our children develop are actually empathy and compassion for others. The data is clear that what our children need to develop all of these critical skills is more time to play freely without the use of screens. You are hopefully familiar with Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation. In it, he advocates strongly for phone-free schools and returning to what he calls a play-based childhood. I recently listened to Dr. Haidt speak on a podcast where he expressed that he was happy to see real action being taken on a large scale to address phone use in schools. I'm very happy to see that as well. But then Dr. Haidt said it was now time to turn our attention to rolling back the use of ed tech devices such as iPads in schools. These devices were sold to us on the promise that they would help prepare our children for their digital future. However, as Dr. Height states, after its release in 2010, the iPad quickly became a staple of young children's daily lives. It was in this brief period from 2010 to 2015 that childhood in
30
America
seconds.
and many other countries was rewired into a form that was more sedentary, solitary, virtual, and incompatible with healthy human development. As an educator with 2 decades of experience teaching in STEM who is currently parenting a preschooler, I wholeheartedly believe that young children can and should learn the skills they need to thrive in the digital age without the potentially harmful effects of screens on their young brains. So I hope that this board has already been discussing the recommendation to roll back screen use for the early grades, and if not, I hope I have inspired you to do so and to be on the front lines of the next movement to help reverse course on the troubling trends we are witnessing.
Yep, and you're out of time.
Oh, can I read one last sentence? I'm almost to the end. I'm right here. Oh no, troubling trends when it comes to kids, devices, social media, and mental health. So I encourage you to seek feedback from teachers because obviously they know our children best. And lastly, I just want to say thank you. Even though I don't work in the district anymore, I choose to live here because I wanted to raise my son here. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gary. Okay, next up we have Lauren. And I'm going to say your last name wrong, even though I should know.
Rognolo.
Yeah. Nola. I always try to put the G first
It's
or
okay.
the N.
Okay.
Let us know when you're
Yeah,
ready.
I'm ready. Okay. Good evening. First, let me share that I come to you with great respect for the work you guys do. I appreciate everything that goes into the decisions you make for our district. I'm an employee here, but tonight I'm here as a parent of 2 students who attend Fairport to share some insights regarding the time change proposed for 2026. I see the proposed time change as something that might appear to address one issue while inadvertently creating many other issues. From my understanding, the time change is rooted in studies around the importance of sleep for adolescents, and there's no doubt that this is true and widely believed and understood by the Fairport community. The studies are extensive, the science is sound, and sleep is integral for student health. I can understand the logic that if we move the times back for high school start times, they will sleep in later and then they will solve the sleep deficit issue. But the flaw in this logic comes down to the fact that our students and students everywhere are operating in a hustle culture that the shift will not address. Our kids are involved in sports and clubs, jobs, church, full course load, SAT prep, NHS, band chorus, volunteer work, AP courses, tutoring, robotics, drama, district committees, and sometimes providing childcare for kids at home. This simply is a truth for students today. And as parents, we strive to raise well-rounded kids. We encourage them to participate in a variety of community activities. And we subscribe to the belief that if we don't do this, they can't have a seat at the proverbial table to compete with kids from other schools. And I say this all as someone who completely participates in this. My own kids are in 3 sports. They're in drama. They're in clubs. I have an extensive calendar with a drop-off and pickup schedule. My hallway is filled with cleats and backpacks. Like, this is real. But this is a reality that we can't necessarily change, and we have to make our decisions rooted in this reality. So we've decided to shift school times in the belief that it will somehow will afford them the more sleep, but I just don't think until we remove things from their to-do list that that's gonna change their sleep. And additionally, with this shift in school times, there's a myriad of other issues being created. One is childcare. So this doesn't affect me personally, but I know many people in the community have shared this concern with me. My sister being one of those people who also lives in the community. So people with young kids have relied on high school age students to get those kids off the bus. There's a shortage of childcare available for this population. And with the new start time, that'll be like a new issue to face for families. And it can be financially prohibitive for families. This is a concern I've heard echoed.
You have 30 seconds.
Oh, 30, shoot, okay. Equity also comes to mind when it comes to sports and clubs. I think that the logistics haven't yet been shared, but getting kids to come to school and either before school or after school to keep the leisure that they want is going to be difficult. And if they have to come before school, it's going to render the efforts for them to sleep completely unsuccessful. So I'm asking you to consider the impact of the shift and weigh the reality against the perceived benefits. I offer this perspective from a place of respect, and I understand that I might not know the full picture, but from where I sit next to many concerned neighbors and parents, I think the shift could create more problems than solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. Someday I will say your last name correctly. How many of my kids have you had? Carrie Klein.
I'm ready when you
You
are.
ready?
Yep. Good evening, members of the Board of Education and Superintendent Provenzano. My name is Carrie Klein, and not only am I a graduate of the Fairport School System, but I've been a teacher here since 2003. I would like to take a moment to address something you may not have considered when changing the start time and end time for the schools in the district. While research shows that students' mental health improves with more sleep and helps combat stress and anxiety, something that hasn't been talked about is how this will impact students with activities, something that often acts as a lifeline for many students. Currently at FHS, we have almost a 10th period where students have the ability to meet with teachers for extra help or make up missed work. During this time, many clubs meet. NHS, Brotherhood Sisterhood Club, Medal UN, Chess Club, and even the club I am the advisor for Downstage. At 3:30, when this 10th period ends, students can then go to work, attend play rehearsal, or go to their sports practice. In 2026, when the time switches to FHS releasing at 3:45, students will have to choose. Some may say that this is a good thing, that our students are already overscheduled and overcommitted. However, this eliminates opportunities for many students. Colleges, while the primary focus on admission is coursework and GPA, they also take into consideration extracurricular activities. Our students would have fewer activities on this part of their applications, putting them at a disadvantage. Colleges focus on the longevity of someone's participation in an organization as well as if they have taken on a leadership position. Only a select few are chosen to be president or captain. With limited time to participate in extracurricular activities, students would have fewer opportunities to do so, again, putting them at a disadvantage. One suggestion is that we have clubs meet before the start of school. This not only contradicts why we are moving to start classes later, but becomes an issue of equity. How would students get to school early? If we don't provide busing, then those students who can't drive yet, have access to their own car, or have someone who can drop them off, would miss out on these club meetings. Let's not forget those students who live outside of Fairport, like our urban suburban students, who would also miss out on those opportunities, creating an even wider gap of inequity. Who will advise these clubs? I myself have young children whose bus drops them off at 4 p.m. With staying for this 10th period, I can still make it home to get them. When the time for school changes, who will want or even be able to stay until 5 p.m. or come in earlier to start their day to advise these clubs? Fairport has a rich tradition of culture-carrying clubs. Without the students and the man and women power to facilitate them, the essence of what a Raider is will be grossly stripped down. All of these scenarios don't take into account students who need to work.
And Carrie,
Not-
you have 30 seconds.
Thank you. Not the students who want money to go to lunch during senior privileges, but students who need to work to provide for their families so they have food on a table and roof over their heads. With over 15.5% of our students receiving free and reduced lunches in the district, this population should give us pause. With students not starting to work until after 4 p.m., when will they meet with teachers? When will they complete homework? Will they have to align their schedules for early release so they have the same availability for scheduling as their peers in other districts? And so they miss out on the end of day activities like the holiday
Carrie,
jazz
your time
concert,
is-
Brotherhood
sorry.
Sisterhood Week,
Why is
the
it
play
so
teaser, or Raider Palooza.
Your time is up.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I don't know why it went
It
up
got
loud.
really angry.
And again, you could feel free to forward those to me, and I'll make sure
Yeah.
the board gets them.
Yep.
I mean,
You wrote them up, so feel free to email. Okay, Tegan, bye.
Let me know when.
Nope, whenever you're good.
Okay. Hi, I'm Tegan Bai, and I'm the overcommitted student that Mrs. Klein was just talking about. I am a student here, and living in Fairport my entire life, I have never been exceptional at any certain subject in school, and I found quite early on that the stage, art, music, and drama was where I thrived. I would find myself watching the clock until 2:10 hit so that I could explore my passions. I worked hard in school to get good grades so that I could continue to do all these incredible activities that Fairport has to offer. But the best part of these clubs was meeting the people that I would never in a million years have talked to if I wasn't a part of these commonly threaded interests. Now, I'm a senior, and I'm the co-president of the drama club, editor-in-chief of the school newspaper, and the captain of Downstage. All of these activities begin at 2:25 on various days throughout the school week. Throughout these activities, Downstage in particular, I met athletes, artists, mathletes, musicians, and sincere friends that have truly made my Fairport experience nothing short of memorable. I can go on and on about how these experiences and people have shaped me through these clubs here, and that's what makes it so upsetting that just moving the start time to a few hours later would have caused these people and memories to never have entered my life. As a leader in these clubs, we work hard with things like Wellness Wednesdays and cast and crew bonding, post-show sleepovers, and group traditions to foster healthy and inclusive and welcoming communities to all individuals that come to Fairport. So knowing that people will be stripped of the opportunity to be a part of these outlets is something that makes me quite upset. Even more than that, these outlets helped me express myself so much along with many others. I feel it's important to shine a light on the student perspective, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, up next we have Amy Bruckle. Whenever you're ready.
Okay. Good evening. First, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this evening, and thank you also for your willingness to serve our community as members of our Fairport Board of Education. My name is Amy Bruckle, and I'm a parent of children in the Fairport School District. I have been a Fairport educator for the past 25 years, and I am a lifelong resident of the Fairport community. I am a Red Raider. I would like to speak to you about my concerns related to the proposed changes to school start times, and I urge you to please reconsider these changes. There are a number of problems created by this proposal that I have not heard addressed by the Board of Education, and I do not know of any committee where staff members, parents, or community members were able to serve on to investigate or address these problems. As a parent, I do not think it is in the best interest of my elementary age children to start school before 8 a.m. and to end school before 3 p.m. I'm a parent to 3 children who attend or will attend Fairport schools. My children have to be woken up in the morning to catch the bus by 8:20 a.m. I have heard a lot of communication coming from the district about how the research shows that older students need later start times. However, I have heard nothing about the research as to how earlier start times for elementary students affects them. Most children will be up earlier, consequently have less sleep, and for many of them will need another 1 to 1.5 hours of aftercare. This is a whole lot more time away from their homes and families. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that children ages 6 to 12 get between 9 and 10 hours of sleep per day. My children are on the high end of that, currently needing between 11 and 12 hours. They go to bed by 7:30 p.m. to be woken up at 7:30 a.m. In order for them to be on a bus around 7 a.m., which would be in the dark, a whole nother issue, I would need to wake them close to 6 a.m. Those of you with young children know they don't move quickly ever, but especially in the morning. They would need to be in bed and asleep by 6 p.m. to get their 11 to 12 hours. I'm sure that you can imagine a 6 p.m. bedtime feels impossible for any family. My kids enjoy community activities that are often not finished until 7 p.m. or later. And while my children's education is and always will be the most important aspect of their young lives, their participation in these activities supplement their lives. They provide enjoyment, teach them life skills, and help them to develop relationships. It would crush them and me for them to lose the ability to participate in these events. Additionally, my husband has a job with a demanding schedule, and most days isn't home before 5:30 or 6 p.m. If we had to do bedtime close to 6 p.m. and they'd be up and on a bus by 7 a.m. in the morning, he wouldn't be able to see them
20 seconds.
almost ever during the week. I've barely touched upon the fact that there's so many more families who will need aftercare for their children. We will have to find adults or programs since high school students will not be available, and that will be costly. I have heard no communication about after-school care programs, expansion of them through the YMCA or Parent and Rec
Time
Center.
is up.
We bought our house and chose to raise our family here in Fairport, and specifically in the Brooks Hill community. But this change in start times will upend our lives in many different ways. And I know I am not alone in these feelings. Every elementary school parent that I have talked to has concerns about changing the start
Amy, your
time.
time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I would reiterate, it would be great for folks to stick around for after public comment. Let's see, we have Nicole Allen.
I can't stick around. I have pickleball in 9 minutes.
Oh, cool.
I'm not being rude when I literally jet out. All right. I'm not talking about start times. I've already emailed Brett about that. No, I am here. Oh, I'm ready. I am a teacher in the district. Sometimes I come as a parent, sometimes I come as a teacher. Today I just wanted to share something that I did with my 5th grade reading students. I'm a reading teacher, so I have students who struggle to read or it's a non-preferred task. And I wanted to do something a little different with them to start this cycle because they need to work on fluency and comprehension. So I gave them 10 debate topics and had them vote on them. And the ones, there were just 3 kids in the group, the one that got the most vote, I would provide them with articles, they would read the articles, they would reread the articles, and they would fill out an organizer with their position, pros, and cons. And the topics the top 3 topics, one was, are uniforms needed in school, which I thought was strange, an interesting one that they chose. The other one that they voted on was, should kids be allowed to have cell phones? I've already been here and talked about that. And then the one that was the top voter that we ended up discussing is, does homework really help? Thought that was interesting because I don't know if that's something that you guys will be discussing. I know there was a thought exchange about it. I know teachers had to do a year-long thing about grading policies. So one of the things I told them as a buy-in was that if they did a good job, I would take their ideas and present it to you guys. So I am not here to tell my ideas. The 3 of them, believe it or not, were on the con side of homework. They said homework is not beneficial. I don't have strong opinions yet about homework, but I had to take the other side just so we had someone to argue with. And so that's why I'm here, is to share with you some of the reasons the kids came up with, the 5th graders. I gave them 3 articles, had them, again, like I said, read them, reread them, fill out their organizer. I set up music stands. The 3 of them stood on one side of the room. I stood up on the other side. Was trying to get them, critical thinking and arguing or debating. I asked them to take what I would say and be prepared to argue against what I said. In the end, I asked them, because I know I've only got 3 minutes, I asked them I had each of them pick one of their reasons why they think homework is not beneficial that they wanted me to share, and that's why I'm here. So the ones that student number 1 said that one of the things they read and they agreed with was, you get less time with your family when you're doing homework, less enjoyable time with your family. Student number 2 talked about not getting enough sleep. So those kids who have a lot of homework, they might not be getting the hours of sleep that were just previously mentioned. And the last reason was stressful, how stressed out kids get because of doing the homework and when it is hard for them. And then I forgot the other one was lack of fresh air and exercise. If they're busy doing homework, they're not getting fresh air and exercise. So now I can tell my kids, I held my word, I shared their ideas with the Board of Education.
Oh, you can show them
Yeah,
the video.
okay. We'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Nicole.
Erica.
Good luck on your game.
Erica, Nicole. And last we have Michael DeMay.
I'm just going to say thank you now.
Okay.
Sincerely. It's a great community you've helped us create.
Ready?
I'm ready. I'm Mike DeMay. I'm a 1992 Fairport graduate. I have 3 kids that have come through this district. My daughter will be the first 9th grade class that comes up here for the next 4 years. I teach physical education, health, driver education. I've been doing that for 28 years. I teach the 5th grade health puberty lessons, coach modified boys football, coach modified girls A basketball, varsity unified basketball, alt ed for phys ed, alt ed and ENL summer school. I've literally taught every type of kid that we have, including being a class advisor for the kids that show leadership. I have a very good feel, in my opinion, as far as what this community is looking for. As a teacher, I feel that our most important job is to create positive memories, things that you can bring along with you from high school that are going to help mold your life for the rest of your lives. The science test did not do that for me personally. It's these other outside things that have done that. What makes Fairport unique? Our culture. What makes us different? Our culture. We try to create a well-rounded student that is a total person versus just a robot that can go through academic type things and take tests. And I think that's something that's really, really important. Making a school that's so big feel small is one of the largest challenges that we face. Drama, athletics, music, the electives that we take. What's really cool is you'll have, I mean, we had the Enemy Club a long time ago. I didn't know there was a group of kids that even want to do that, right? But you could sit there and find 10, 12, 20 kids that other kids in school wouldn't even know that want to do that. They would then become part of that club and meet people that are like-minded, because as a health teacher, one of our biggest concerns is mental health. If kids don't have connections and kids don't have friend groups and they don't have other outside things to do, that's where things tend to go wrong. So I honestly think that data is important, but I don't view data as a more important thing than the mental well-being of our community, the culture of where we're at. And I understand we do maybe need a time change, but just from my own perspective, maybe something that's a little less aggressive, something that's maybe more 8 o'clock to a little bit earlier versus so late because of after-school activities and all these things that the kids are trying to do. But I do honestly, sincerely appreciate everything that you do. I appreciate the opportunity to work here and to speak here, and thank you.
Oh, thanks. I wasn't prepared not to give the 30-second warning. Okay, well, thank you for coming and speaking to us today. Again, I'll just remind everyone that you are more than welcome to email us and Brett, or if you want to just send your information to Brett, he can forward it along to us as well. So I'm going to move along with our agenda, and our student advisory is not here today, which brings me to my report, which is not very long. Because I want to hand it off to Mr. Provenzano so he can. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. No, I'm kidding. So I will keep it short and sweet, but happy almost spring. We are in the midst of Brotherhood Sisterhood Week, one of those culture things that I think most you were talking about. I keep hearing wonderful feedback from my own kid and from teachers and other staff across the buildings. March is a very busy month. We've had musicals, plays, robotics competitions. We even hosted Odyssey of the Mind regional events, which my son got to do in Fairport, which was very nice for a change. I did want to remind everyone here and at home that our role on the board is nonpartisan. Our collective goal is to support our students and staff. Tonight, we will be looking at the draft budget for the upcoming school year, knowing that changes will be made when we have a better understanding of what New York State is going to be coming out with their budget. In the past month, as a team, we have continued our advocacy efforts through various channels. Our board members have engaged in committee work, met with local and state representatives, and connected with the broader community, listening to what folks are wanting and needing. For example, earlier this month, Brett and I traveled to Albany for the day, and we met with our representatives, the governor's office, and the New York State Education Department. During these meetings, we advocated on behalf of our district and the importance of maintaining strong funding for public education, which we will continue to do. So I just want to thank everyone on the board and our staff and our community for the continued support and commitment to our students and staff. I feel together we will continue to advocate for what is best for our district and ensure that there is success and support for public education. Now, before I hand the microphone over to Brett, the board did want to take a few minutes, not too long, don't worry, just to thank Matt Stevens. So Matt, you've been with us for quite some time in Fairport, over 10 years. You've been through many budget cycles and capital improvement projects. You've answered hundreds of board questions in a way that we can understand easily and explain to other people. Your calm leadership and frugal tendencies have kept us afloat and ahead of many others. You've been a huge asset to our whole district. You will be missed, but we're very excited for what the future will bring for you in your new role in Mid-Row 1 BOCES. So we have a little gift for you, and try not to cry. So thank you for everything that you've done. We know you're a phone call away. And Jeremy, we're happy to have you on board. And it is fitting that this is your last meeting with us as, I guess, a staff member, but I'm hoping you'll come to public comment and
Yeah.
we'll see you as a parent here, that you'll be going over the budget with all of us and Jeremy and Brett. So very fitting. Thank you. And that is all I have. So I'm going to pass it on to Mr. Provenzano.
I'll save my comments for Mr. Stevens.
Okay.
Thank you. It's March, and it's an amazing time of year. And I do call it Fairport March Madness. It's Fairport style, the way that we do school and the way that we create memories and build connections in so many different ways. You know, everybody's talked about the drama clubs. Everyone's talked about the great opportunities that people are having in our school district, celebrating the performing arts. If you haven't made it to the Parrington Square Mall, hundreds of pieces are on exhibit celebrating our students' talent and of course, our great educators who guide them along the way. There's one picture I want you to focus on. It's in the 12 o'clock position at the top. You see Paige Ditzel. As you know, Paige graduated last year. And why is she in this year's photos, though? We have an amazing community, and it's going to be hard for me to get through this, but I was at the conference a couple weeks ago when we were doing our advocacy trip. I got a call, and I got a call from a student. How that student got my number is a whole different conversation, right? And he's like, Mr. P, this is so-and-so and such and such. It's, and, you know, he explained to me, Paige is going to the Special Olympics. I'm like, okay, where's this going? Like, what could he possibly want to do? Paige graduated. He wanted to have a send-off, right? And he wanted to celebrate Paige, because if you know Paige, she loves Fairport. She embraced the community. And I was like, what do we got to do? What do you have in mind? And he sort of arranged it. I connected to John Kidd, in our safety and security team, and they had a big send-off for here at Fairport High School as the girls were headed to, I believe, a sectional game.
Yep.
And I didn't get back in time, but I saw pictures of all the celebrating and the horns honking, and I think that's the Fairport experience. We had a student who was a sophomore in this school called the superintendent directly, right, and advocated for a child who had the biggest smile on her face and had such great successes and great memories. I believe it was in Italy.
It was.
Yep. Right, and I believe she might have gotten a silver medal. Right?
She did.
Right. And,
yep.
But you know, again, that's part of the Fairport experience. Definitely worth acknowledging. And I am so proud of this school district. The very reason why I moved my family after 45 years in a neighboring school district to come to Fairport was because of care, because of the ideas of celebrating compassion, awareness, respect, and embracing differences. I really have nothing to do with it. I ride on the coattails of many. Leah Greenman, who is a math teacher, wanted to take it over, and she had a whole bunch of kids. Lindsay Reddig, amazingly coordinated. They were talking about Brotherhood Sisterhood Week, bringing all the principals, all the buildings together. And I think, you know, to Bob's credit, he's recognized a couple years ago, this is just not a Fairport High School thing anymore. And in all of our schools, and I had to leave our meeting early today because I wanted to get to Minerva to hear their family talk. And then I was over at Northside and then Dudley. And tomorrow's, you know, we're doing more. And then Thursday, we're doing the Reach Out. And then Friday, I think Unplugged will be alive and well, where we're celebrating each other and coming together as a community. And I speak about it, but each time I speak about it, it's the soul of our community. And no matter what political climate we're in, no matter what economic climate we're in, no matter what we agree or disagree in, these ideas make us a unique community. When we're in airports, hundreds, thousands of miles away, and you see somebody from Fairport, you are brought back to these ideas in this day. And that's a tribute to our amazing staff who's in front of us here tonight. I was actually, you know, walked someone to your class today because they were, you know, running a little late, and I was their pass. So they're, you know, worldly in that way too. So thank you, Ms. Bruckle, for your kindness there. Exciting week, and thank you for enabling it, because if you didn't think this was important, we wouldn't be able to do it. So thank you so much. You hear much about the consolidation in the pillars, right? You know, future use of Minerva land. We're finalizing with our community partner for partial use of Minerva land facility. We'll be talking about how we're going to be using Minerva land beginning in 26, 27 when we're able to do that through a formal lease. Staffing analysis continues to occur to make sure that when we are prepared for the change, that we're honoring all contracts and communicating with those people who are impacted. There's a wellness committee out there. They created a survey. The survey is now open. They're getting great feedback. Mr. Clark showed that to me today, and I think then we'll be called to respond to that as we move through the next several months. There's a transition team meeting during March Superintendent's Conference Day where they're going to be talking about school start time, staff culture, and our students going through some nuances, that all the questions that staff had throughout the past several months that we hope to continue to address. And again, we're looking at the start times, and tonight I'm going to be talking about a partnership very briefly, because I believe that it's the YMCA's partnership to really talk about how they're going to expand wraparound services here in Fairport. We chose the YMCA because they were very responsive to our community's needs. They provide resources and access to human services where.
Sorry, were you able to talk with other potential partners?
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
So I'll answer that right now, but we definitely talked to multiple different partners. We assessed whether we could do it, like other organizations have chosen to do. We talked to a local, 2 other school districts as well, and the YMCA came through and through with a proposal that will meet the community's needs. Again, having access to external resources like the Department of Human Services, they can help those families who do not have the financial resources. They also have resources beyond that for families who don't qualify for any type of social services. They have a range of networks of support, and they stand ready to support our families who are in need and able to provide that service. And on top of that, they also have a commitment to those families who do not have a financial need per se, but understand the fact that it will be a financial burden. And again, they will be communicating. They didn't want to communicate early because right now they're in the middle of their enrollment right now, and they don't want to confuse families. They're a strong community partner. It's the most cost-effective option and proposition that we were able to find and research after multiple months, and continuing to bring that up in this venue of we continued to extend the time because we wanted to give them time to come up with a proposal, and they came through. And they'll be communicating very soon in the near future. We'll be having a press release very soon to communicate to families so they know at least we have a partner, and then they will be the ones communicating the finances and the ways to access their resources. And to the right, you'll see start times at the elementary schools, and then in our second tier, which includes JA, and Joanna Parent and Martha Brown, and Fairport High School, which our colleagues and school members and parents here came to advocate for. And that's what I have on, and I know that, I don't know if that was up to the billing, but.
No, I was going to say, just a reminder that we started this 2 years out, right? Other neighboring districts did not have such a long timeline buffer. So they didn't have as much time to take into account different, questions and concerns. So we're excited that we already have this to share. And just the reason why they can't share yet is because they're currently registering kids for next year, and we have another whole year. So it is significantly different than the way that some other districts are going about it.
Yeah. And sorry, Superintendent Provenzano, because I live this life, and slots are always hard to come by. Is the Y going to be able to meet our projected community needs?
As we start, there's going to be an enrollment process.
Okay.
We feel through the Y, based upon our research and understanding, just an estimate, and our other partner, Parrington Rec, there should be seats available. Now, saying that, as they start, they might have to learn and grow, but we feel optimistic that we'll be able to, meet the needs of most of our families.
Great, thank you.
And I wanted, looking at these items, and again, thank you everyone for coming and advocating. in front of us today. That was very, very good to hear, and we appreciate you taking the time and raising your concerns. On that looking at the high schools, I think that was one of the main issues that was brought up today. And when we've talked as a board throughout this process, dating back I think to 23, that 9 o'clock start time was always, I think, raised some eyebrows on the board too, as being late given all the after school stuff. So I was wondering if you could walk us through a little bit the process by which you kind of landed there, and given how much, if any, right now flexibility there is in looking at this.
So I have a parent too. I have a ninth grader. I've had two other children who go through the system. I have a ninth grader who's not excited about the idea as well. I think he would fall in that category because he likes to get his tasks going, and I'm not calling him out, but it's just a fact. We're all living it. We've had extensive, multiple studies. We brought in outside consultants to look at the routes, to reroute, and it's something that we're going to continue to review. But these are the times that we know for sure that will work.
So in terms of the consultants and conversations, this is about busing and about the bus routes and being able to
To navigate, because we have a 3-tier system, and that 3-tier system makes us unique. As you see, that's why we don't have a morning and afternoon run. It becomes about cost effectiveness, and the number of bus drivers available to transport our students. So we are aware that the 9 o'clock time and the 3:45 end time, is something that it's always been of notice and concern. The board, to the board's credit, they focus more on the research and what the research says, and understanding that some of these issues that were brought up are very practical issues that we know that are out there. And, some of those questions will be answered in time based upon some of the feedback and thoughts that you shared. But we do know that 9 o'clock to 3:45, creates some challenges, and but the benefits to the decision was outweighed the detriments. And but that doesn't mean we're going to stop studying it or not looking at it. But I need to be consistent with my time frames, and I don't want to be fuzzy about it. And this is what it is until it's not. Because families are planning and they're getting organized around it. Any other thoughts?
Yeah.
More to come.
Yep.
We're in the middle of budget season. I'm not going to go over this whole timeline. Tonight we're going to be focusing on the instructional budget, first draft, and we'll be talking about what the budget looks like at this time and what is in the budget, and how it's impacting us financially at this time. So I'm looking forward to doing that. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a video that I'm going to show as part of my instructional budget.
Okay.
Oh.
She looked at me
wondering
like
where the
I
right
worked so
spot
hard
was.
on that.
I was looking too.
Lindsay's like, I don't have time.
Okay. Which leads us to board member committee reports. So I'm going to mute myself.
Eric always looks at me first because she knows I go first. So just a quick,
Because you're on committees with me.
just a quick shout out before I hit my committees. I know we've talked about drama, but shout out to the kids and the crew and the teachers who worked on all of these shows. So Haiti Sound at the high school, SpongeBob at Martha, Alice in Wonderland at Minerva Land, and this weekend we have The Force Abides, or even Stormtroopers Get the Blues at JP. I love that title. And shout out to the kids who were in all-county band, chorus, and choir. Middle school was 2 weeks ago. High school was this past week. So again, to the kids, but also the teachers and all the staff that makes all of this happen. We appreciate all of that. So legislative, March 3rd, Erica mentioned that she and I traveled to Albany with the Monroe County School Board Association for our advocacy day. Brett was there with the Council of Superintendents. We met with representatives from the Minority Council's office, from the Governor's office, and Assemblyman Benedetto's office, talking all the greatest hits, right? Foundation aid and need for stability and increased funding there, zero emissions buses and the need for anything there. The proposed smartphone rules and advocating for local control for all districts, that we know all districts know what works best for them. It was a good day of good meetings, and I think good advocacy on behalf of the county. Statewide, the One House budget came out last week, so this is the state and assembly version answer to the governor's proposal from earlier in the month. There's a chart that NISBA put out. I'm going to send to the board, and I'll put out. We can put out publicly too, just so people can get a good shot of the differences. The one house budget, more foundation aid and higher annual increase levels is what they're proposing than the governor did. The Assembly's budget has higher funding for pre-K. Thank you, Jen Lunsford, for her work and her advocacy in a situation like that. And everything funds universal meals. But this is, of course, where we get to the Assembly and Senate and governor doing the big negotiation dance, and we wait and see. And I know at the federal level, both at Albany and in conversations, there's a lot of fear, a lot of waiting, and a lot of uncertainty about what's happening. There was a letter MC shared with the board last week. The New York Attorney General was one of 13 attorneys general to send out guidance to schools saying that we can continue the work that we're doing without fear right now, which is really good. So to quote Nick Fury from the Avengers, until such time as the world ends, we will act as though it intends to spin on. So that is the legislative update.
Anyone else have things they want to report out on?
We had audit and finance last week. We dug into some of the budgets, particularly we looked at the reserve accounts and the historical look at, and I know Mr. Dordone and Mr. Stevens are going to go over that tonight, kind of how we've used it in the past or how we've planned to use it, and then what the actual use was, and I thought that was really beneficial to my understanding for budget planning. We also talked to energy performance contracts, which are kind of different contracts that are out there that can kind of address some of the energy work. It might be beneficial in our K-8 project coming up in the fall as a potential small cost savings area, in that you get aid and you get energy savings paired together, whereas you still have to pay for it, but the potential is that it would buffer it. So it was interesting learning about that. So I appreciate Brett and team continuing to look at all options to have everything at the ready when we're talking about stuff like that. Then policy is still chugging away on policies.
Are we good? Okay. Which leads us to the treasurer and investment update. Mr. Stevens.
Yeah, thank you and good evening. Before I jumped into the super exciting stuff for the treasurer's report, I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to the board. It's been a pleasure, honor working together in for you over the past 10 years. In my time, I moved my family from the Syracuse area, knew that Fairport was the place that we wanted to live and have our own kids come through the school system, and part of that is a reflection of the leadership here in the school district. So thanks for all the support, and it's really been a pleasure and honor to work alongside and for you over the past 10 and a half years, as well as the administration, staff, everyone I've met here. It's really shaped my family, myself, my kids, and everything that we've become here. So it feels like only yesterday that this transition was going to happen, and I can't believe it's almost here. So it's a unique time for me personally, as work through these last couple weeks with Jeremy, and a great addition to the team here as well. So thank you. Really honored, and I appreciate everything, all the support over the years. And now just to jump into the treasurer and investment update for January of 2025. We had a beginning cash balance in the general fund of $118.5 million, receipts in the month of $7.1 million, disbursements of $31.3 million, for an ending cash balance of $94.3 million. Of that, majority of those funds invested in a mix of the money market, insured cash sweep, treasury bill accounts as a whole. They're earning additional funds on those monies. You'll see during the month of January a large interest cash receipt. We did have a maturity of a treasury bill during the month of January. And also you'll notice a couple of unique things during January. We see retiree health credits, because that's when our billings go out for health insurance semi-annually, January and July. So we see those monies coming back into the district to pay for retiree health. And then Also in disbursements, one unique piece, that 31.3 million, not all expense for operating. 17.9 million is related to a transfer to the capital fund for the 2023 approved project. So that cash going over to the capital fund, that was approved reserve usage during the proposition in which voters approved. So if you look down in the bottom, you'd notice if you compared last month to this month, the capital reserve dropped from the 33 million down to the 16 million by that 17 million. So that's the change in where you see that cash overall. And then in looking at a comparison of last year in terms of year to date through January, revenues and expenses, right on track. Most of our revenue coming from the property taxes and state aid, about 114 million recognized to date, or about 76% of the revenue, aligning similar to last year and trending, primarily because most of our revenue comes from state aid and property tax, and you'll see on the presentation itself. And then expense-wise, year to date actually expensed about 75 million, or about 47% of the budget, which again would trend and be right along what we would expect as we move throughout the school year. Most of our expenses lining with OC services, salaries, benefits on those monthly basis for costs. And that wraps up the report for the month of January.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Okay, so up next, it's the big show.
The big show.
The big show. We are going to have a presentation about the 2025-26 instructional budget draft. I keep reiterating the draft portion, and I think it's going to be a combination of presenting.
Come on, Mr. Stevens, let's do this one last time.
Is there any-
Get out of your way. Right. Yes, I think first things first, Matt, you've been an amazing friend and colleague, but more importantly, a friend, I should say. So patient and, teaching us all. So this is our last time doing this. It's bittersweet. I won't be emotional here. I could do that later. And, I think our friendship will last. I'll reschedule my emotions. I'll reschedule my emotion for later, but your imprint is seen and felt throughout the district. Again, you taught me so much, and I look forward to carrying on your frugalness. No judgment, though. But I think you are or were the right person at the right time, doing the right things for this district. So tons of thanks and appreciation. We look forward to working with Jeremy, who's been working closely with us as we develop this budget. We're confident that he's going to follow in your footsteps and do great things. Once again, thank you to you and your team, Monica and Chris, who always seem to pull this together. There's been 12 administrators and staff who've been a part of this process. The community's been engaged through multiple different ways, and we're building a budget. And I think Erica stated a little bit that this is where we are right now today. Again, I'm going to reiterate it and say that we do see a path forward. We'll be talking a little bit about what's happening with our budget and how it's and how healthcare is impacting our budget and everybody's budget. But starting out very formally, just to make sure that we're consistent with our process, we'll be talking about our budget goals, the instructional budget. This is the first draft that you're seeing. You're going to see revenues, and that's again where you're going to see some things that are happening in healthcare that's not only impacting Fairport, but the entire county, and talking about some long-range planning and an approach to moving forward as we develop the budget. Again, these goals, particularly during times when you are looking at being disciplined in your approach to budgeting, they help, right? And I think seeing them, improving them, making sure that we echo them multiple times throughout the budget season and process has been incredibly important. That's a tribute to the board, because we start in July and we go through the summer and into the fall, late fall, and we have an approval of these budget goals. And so we know what our targets are well before any budget comes out from the governor's office. And again, it's focusing on student learning. Really proud of the fact of the work that we're doing at MTSS. the UPK pieces that have been a board priority. How do we continue to improve upon that? You'll see those pieces in this budget. We talk about investing in modern, environmentally sustainable facilities and making sure that they're safe and up to standards. And again, when you're looking at deficits as we are, how can we keep our eye on that so we can achieve this goal, because that's what the board has directed us to do. We'll be talking a little bit about that over the next couple weeks as well. And I think being transparent so we can be sustainable. It costs dollars to run our program. We owe it to our community to be transparent. I know the board members sit on the Audit and Finance Committee. We'll have conversations about process and how we can prepare for a sustainable future. Our enrollment has been declining almost 2% a year since 2022-23. So it's like over the past several years, you'll see up to a 6% decrease. I think we're stabilizing, and you might even see a little bit more bumps. Our kindergarten numbers are a little bit higher than we anticipated, which is a good thing. And we projected that as well, because when we've done our enrollment studies, they're holding true. And you can see, these numbers, back in the day, you were seeing, class sizes when I was a principal up to 470. There's class sizes higher, that date back, 15 years that were in the 500s as well. And again, we were projecting this. We have a community. People don't leave our community. When people do move into our community, there's no longer, 5 kids in a household. There's 2 kids, 1 to 2 kids. I mean, that's just the natural course of action. It speaks to the greatness of our community, how people stay in their homes, right? And when homes go up, they sell. But this is how it's impacting our enrollment. Still one of the largest school districts in the county, though. So I think, when you look at Fairport High School, it's one of the largest high schools as well. Can't lose sight of that. Class sizes, when we reach out to the community, the class sizes, again, I think that's a subjective term, because everyone has a different thought and idea of what small classes look, sound, and feel like. But the board has set targets, which we strive to achieve, and we do our best to meet them. And consistently throughout the years, we've met them, and we feel we are within those ranges as well. In this budget cycle, we have a total of, again, due to declining enrollment, declining sections. As you see on the right-hand side, I can't see anymore, but you'll see that -2 sections at Brooks Hill, -2 at Dudley, projecting -1 at Northside, and -1 at JP due to declining enrollment. So that's a total of -6 sections, and we'll see how that's being allocated throughout this process. In 7th and 8th grade and 9th through 12th grade, these are the class sizes that we continually strive to achieve. In some cases, you'll see smaller class sizes due to special classes, due to resources in the classroom, like technology, safety, and space limitations, where you might see smaller class sizes. But for the most part, when you're running electives, we try to get up to 20. And if we don't get up to 20, we don't run that class. Again, just because you have to put a framework around it. But you will see some electives with less than 20 as well. So based upon, again, size, limitation, and maybe it's a part of a special pathway or program that students need to take. So this budget, there's lots to celebrate. And we're going to talk a little bit about the things that are in this budget. And this is your cue, Mr. Muller, to see if we can get that to a video. Very specialized programs that are part of the instructional budget. It's our bright spot today that we thought that you would enjoy. Good work. You're doing great.
Oh, yes.
I think that the Spark Lab program is really a special thing. It's very unique to Fairport. I have kids who, might struggle in certain areas in the classroom, and then they come in here and they really get a chance to shine because they love working with computers, or they really enjoy our electronics unit, or they're just big builders. And then it gets their foot in the door, and all of a sudden they're learning about, structural integrity of bridges or things like that. And I just think that's a really cool chance for kids to come in here and really have a chance to shine.
Forward. How did our code work? Good. Now.
We have kids in kindergarten in here who are learning about giving commands, and they're telling each other, you know, how to follow commands. And then they learn that if you give someone multiple steps, then you're using a script or an algorithm. And then in first grade, they start to do that with robots, and they do that online. All that builds up to our fifth graders who are using websites like Scratch to create video games. We basically give kids a chance to do things that they might otherwise not get the ability to do.
So, press this button. And then when you... So basically it would be like a bigger button and then they step on it and then this goes on. Yeah, so they know to knock next time.
Huge. We give kids the opportunity to fail in a safe place, and we talk about it all the time. We say, this might not work, right? Or what can we do next? Or try and test and keep going. One of our goals for every lesson is persist at a challenging task. There have been some other school districts around here that are starting programs like this, and we've got a really nice head start because we were able to, you know, start working on this 3 years ago, and you know, many other districts have had interest in our program, and so we've been sort of leading the way on that and helping other people get started. You know, by the time they're going into middle school, they're very well prepared to continue learning. You know, we're getting their interest peaked by talking about 3D printers and things like that, but by the time they're at high school, maybe they want to be, you know, a mechanical engineer or something like that. So it's really neat to see how that, you know, the spark of their interest here could move forward to, you know, I guess more in-depth interest later on. And when you can start having kids coming into middle school with a basic knowledge, they can just do so much more at middle school, which allows the, you know, high school classes and technology teachers to do even more there.
So one of the things that I love about FACS is that from the outside it looks like cooking and sewing, right? That's what people see, and it's great, and those skills themselves are valuable. Everyone should know how to fix a piece of clothing. Everyone should know how to create a healthful meal for their families. But it's the soft skills that they develop whilst doing those subjects that are transferable to the real world. Things like teamwork, problem solving, time management. Like those are all tested pretty, you know, well in our subject areas.
So I think the most powerful thing about our curriculum, our students are more prepared for the workforce. They're ready to do interviews. They're going to be fiscally responsible, but we're also preparing them to go into our community and be powerful members and contribute to society in an effective way.
Wash your hands, get your aprons on. You guys can start. You guys are ready before the bell.
FACS, or home and careers at the middle level, is mandated by the state, so 30 weeks of home and careers education between 6th and 9th grade. But then there are other FACS programs that are electives at the high school, so our program also encompasses culinary arts and child development, which are options for students at the high schools.
You know, everything we do, we try to filter through all the other curriculums to make it really connected and make it more powerful.
So we really start to think about, you know, what do I have to offer? How can I show my value on, for example, a resume? And we do create a resume. And one of my favorite things about that is that it's fully usable. Kids can go and take this thing that they've created in a classroom and actually use it in the real world. And they're going to apply for jobs with, and they're using it in other classes. And it's just, it feels so valuable, because I don't know how many other pieces of work you would create in middle school that you would revisit again and again and actually use in your real life.
There is a rubric, so if you want to double check how you're being graded, you can definitely do that.
Not only are we giving them skills for the rest of their lives, but currently they get to be proud of what they're learning and demonstrate that to the families when they go home. I have had parents and adults in their lives send me pictures of kids that were mending and fixing their loved one, like their little sibling stuffies. So it's when we hear those stories where kids are using what we learned in the classroom outside of the classroom that really shows the power of this curriculum.
And stir it up really well. If it's still too dry, check in with me. We might add just a touch of water to it. Test tiles for all.
Sure, so I graduated in 2000 and I took artist in residence. I think it was my senior year, I'm not sure, but it was my favorite class I've ever taken in high school. It really kind of changed my view on art. most kids have a wonderful experience in art in high school in general, but in artists in residence, they get to work with 7 or 8 different artists a year, and it's really just such a unique experience to not just work with people teaching art, but people who are out there in the community making art and exhibiting works.
I believe this is the 50th year, so I believe it started in 1974. So we're, these kids are working with artists doing their specific art medium, and this is college level type work. I think the kids are excited about art in general regardless, but I mean they're even more excited if they can show or they can work alongside artists or they can get to know an artist on a personal level.
Typically about 26 to 28 days that we come in, and we can kind of break it up however we want. So for ceramics, they spend a few weeks building. They come up with their ideas and we talk about how to push that. A lot of them come in and work a lot outside of class, and we can really, since it's such a small group, we can get really one-on-one and talk about advanced techniques.
It's heavy in decision making, okay? A lot of decision making. And so those skills are actually being fine-tuned without a textbook and without a lecture and how to make a decision. They learn through art, through expression, through rendering.
And these kids really are, I mean, they are applying to all of these like major art schools, and they're going to be the leading artists, people designing their magazines or their furniture or anything. I mean, art is really everywhere, so.
I thought that was a great introduction to the things that are in this budget relative to disciplines that we invest in. And this budget continues to have them. Another part of this budget, Dr. T, welcome, glad you're here. She's going to talk a little bit about some of the MTS pieces that we're seeing as part of our investment.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Superintendent Provenzano, and again, Matt Stevens. We will miss you and wish you the best of luck down the road in the work that you're going to be doing. So thank you. I just wanted to highlight that about 75% of our budget is focused on instruction. And you'll see some of those pieces highlighted here, but I cannot be more proud of the work that our teams are doing across all of our buildings, K-12, including district office, in the work around science of reading, our comprehensive literacy program that we have, as well as the work we're doing around math instruction, writing instruction, our innovation in science and technology, as you saw with the STEAM and the Spark Labs. But then also in other places like our family and consumer science that you saw highlighted here. No longer is it just, what we remember family and consumer science being of learning how to do the recipes and sewing. It's that, and it's everything else that students need to be successful in life. And so we really are a responsive district to not only our student interests and needs, but also to the changing world that our students are entering. And so our team is working very, very hard on that, and we're seeing wonderful growth in all of our areas. So thank you, Superintendent Provenzano.
Thank you, and exciting to hear about the SIT initiatives.
Oh yes, and we have teacher teams actually working in 3 buckets throughout this entire school year, and they were self-selected in these buckets, and so there's 3 areas they're exploring. One is the role of homework that we heard one of our speakers talk about today, so that's ironic.
It's a good piece of data
to hear
for you, by the way.
from the students, so that was wonderful. So the role of homework both in elementary and in secondary schools, as well as the role of grading and how that looks across our schools and the impact that has on students. And then also, why am I missing one?
Standards.
And standards. Making sure that what we're teaching and what we're measuring is aligned with the things that we know matter. And so our teams are working very hard on that, including all of our teachers, and we have some members from our community on those as well. So
Your first week back, and you wanted to dip your toe in, so thank you for your initiative.
that was a very hesitant dip, but
Yeah,
thank you for letting me do that.
You did
I
an amazing
appreciate it.
job, so we're
Thanks.
grateful that you're here.
Happy
We
I'm
missed you.
here.
Glad everything's well with Tavi as well.
Thank you.
And the budget also offers our expectations of having a robust elective program at FHS. Over 110 electives offered. Again, it's based upon student interest and enrollment in those classes, and of course, all the advanced placement courses that we've come accustomed to. Mental health has always been a priority of this board. We have deep investments in there, as well as curriculum learning to continue our focus on aligning curriculum. So what that entails is an instruction portion of our budget of, you'll see some numbers here, our instructional administration, and that is your curriculum writing, your excuse me, the 2000s. The instructional administration is your curriculum writing, your lunch aides, your school monitors, sentries, and guardians. We see all those influence our school. You'll see a 4.25% increase in special education. Again, we're honored to support our students and families with a continuum of services to make sure we're meeting their needs. And summer school, that's a reality. We have to continue to invest in summer school. You will see, learning loss from the pandemic. We're still trying to give more time on task to families, and those resources are available there. Student services, you'll see a 5.69%. Now, what's in student services? Again, that's attendance, that's guidance, that's psych and social workers, our commitments with co-curricular activities, which we know, as one of our speakers said today, they make a difference. Kids come to school just for our co-curricular activities, and that includes our clubs as well. And athletics is in there too, and we all know how well we do athletically. 5.69% increase in that bucket as well, with an instructional budget of total of 2.32%. Then we have the general support, which includes the Board of Education. You'll see a negative there, a negative 5.9% there, so that the board does not receive any compensation, right? The board does engage in lots of professional development. There's trips to Albany. There's times that they invest in their learning so they can be the best for the community, but we appreciate their service. Central administration is my office. That's salary, contracts, and supplies and materials that run through my office, along with my secretary as well, or administrative assistant, excuse me. And then you'll see a business administration increase of 6.19%. Again, that's salary, supplies, contracts, and equipment, 6.19% increase. And central services is, again, our operation, maintenance, security, printing and mailing, our IT department, et cetera. So you'll see a 5.95%. Those are the highlights in that general support area, and that's a total increase of 5.27%. Mr. Stevens is going to talk a little bit about transportation.
All right, thank you, Mr. Provenzano. Some of the shifts you may have seen between the instructional portion of the budget and the general support pieces were some things we talked about last time related to reallocation of equipment money between 1680 code, between 2600 code to a 1680 code, based on the type of computer equipment being purchased, coding it in the right spot. So that's another piece that flows through the whole entire budget as we're developing budget each year, is getting those, working with the department leaders and understanding what's being purchased in terms of those areas. Next, we'll talk about transportation. Overall, transportation is going to involve the student transportation. It's going to involve the any outside contract transportation, both with outside contractors and BOCES. School districts utilize BOCES to provide transportation services, mostly for our students in BOCES programming or special needs programming at BOCES, as well as any work, repairs, supplies, costs related to the garage building. All those tie up into the overall transportation portion of the budget. And here you can see a reduction of about a 2.25%. That's primarily related to contract transportation. So again, our department, HR staff, transportation, they've done a wonderful job in the recruitment, retention of drivers. As we continue to see ourselves hire more drivers, we're able to rely less on contract transportation. Now, there's still a small portion of that left in the budget at this point in time, because it all will depend in route development and where we land come 25-26 school year as a whole throughout the summer with staffing and those pieces. Bus purchases, We'll show the funding on the next slide, but here we have approximately a 10-year bus replacement schedule, a fleet of over 100 vehicles. Some years it can be a little bit more than 9 or 10 a year, depending on the size of the bus being purchased. So as the smaller buses flow into the replacement cycle, we may purchase 12. This year it's 9 because it's all large buses. So right now those buses are over $200,000 a piece. Back when I started, 15 years ago in the business, I think these buses were about $100,000 a piece. So costs have grown tremendously over the years. We are aided on those over a 5-year period, so we are getting that. The increase in cost does drive additional transportation aid for the district. And then you'll see to support the purchase of the buses, we'll be talking a little bit about a bus purchase reserve proposition to go on to the ballot as well. So that's the summary of transportation. And again, you can see many of the different variables that go into the process of developing the transportation budget. Here's a look of at the bus purchase funding. So total cost of $1.8 million, trade-ins of about $22,500. The longer we keep a bus, the less money we get back on a trade. So you're looking at probably about $2,500 per bus that we get back on these trades, and it's mileage, age of bus, those pieces go into play. And then funding sources, so within the general fund budget, we have $1.6 million, and then anticipating a funding from the bus purchase reserve, should proposition be approved, to support the purchase of one of those 9 buses, for a total cost of the $1.806 million. Community service, this is just a line item in the budget. We've seen this for many years, small portion, essentially the local costs of evening use of the pool, typically offset by any facility use. So that's just a budget line so that we can reflect the expense in this category. Next large piece within the budget, employee benefits, and overall you can see a $3.9 million increase in employee benefits. Most of this coming from the increase in healthcare. So the school district is part of the Rochester Area Schools Health Plan Consortium with other Monroe County school districts. Over the years, we've seen perhaps slightly lower increases in premium come January 1 at renewal than perhaps budgeted. However, this year we had a much larger increase in premium, primarily because people are using the plan, right? These plans are claims driven. Saw the plan operate at a little bit of a deficit during the 2024 year, driving costs for 2025. So we saw 14% increase in the healthcare plan budget overall, which drives up our costs as school districts. So that's one major piece. That's primarily the big piece of increase here in the benefits portion. Yes.
Sorry, when you say using the plan, you mean all the Rochester area schools?
All subscribers.
It's not just like our Fairport people are suddenly.
Yep, it's the plan. It's
gotcha.
the entire plan as a whole, right? So we've pulled together all of our staff, retirees, in the consortium, and that's what helps us, keep costs lower over the years. If we looked out in the market, costs could be higher, but overall, we've been able to control costs as a whole in the plan. Yes, it's all school district employees that are part of the consortium, all the subscribers and plan users. So that's what the plan's there for. However, in order to be sure it's being funded properly, that's what increased the cost to the plan, which drives premium increases for anyone enrolled in the plans. And then we also saw a shift in costs at the Medicare Advantage plan level, which are the over 65 plan, primarily related to the Inflation Reduction Act, which shifted some costs from the subscribers, consumers, to the plan. So by shifting costs from subscribers, consumers over to the plan, increasing plan costs as a whole. So those both took place over the course of this past year, which are driving costs for school districts as a whole. So about a 9.36% increase in benefits. The other big pieces, just to touch on them really quickly, the pension systems and the FICA Med, those are costs driven by a percent of salary. So the employee retirement system, that's related to our non-certificated employees. The average contribution rate projected to increase from 15.2% to 16.5% of salaries. And then the teacher retirement system reducing from 10.11% to 9.59%. So you do see a slight decrease in the TRS budget as a whole. It's going to be related to changes in salaries coupled with the contribution rate. So taking our budgeted salaries and looking at it against the contribution rate. And then FICA Med, 7.65% of salaries for all salaries in the budget. Debt service and interfund transfers. Here, most of these categories in terms of the budget are related to our payments on capital improvement projects. So up under the 9731 line where you see debt service and in parentheses bond anticipation notes, that is related to our principal and interest payments on bond anticipation notes. So last year at 3.3 million, next year at 1.8 million. That's because we had a large pay down on a bond anticipation note. We went to long-term debt on a portion of the 2019 project costs, about 16 million. And then we had the interest payment on the total of that bond anticipation note. So we had a approximately $40+ million note. Portion of that went to long-term debt because of our aid flow for the building aid. And then the other portion was renewed at another note, of which is planned to go to long-term debt this June. So the principal and interest payment is the $1.8 million. And then down below, you can see under the transfer to debt service fund, an increase from 16.4 million to 7.6 million. Coupled between the two of those lines for debt, it's about a $400,000 to $500,000 decrease in debt in terms of cost. It's because we have oncoming new costs for the 2019 project, coupled with a reduction in drop-off of debt for an older project. That drop-off of debt for the older project will have a corresponding revenue decrease for building aid under the revenue side of the budget. So that's mostly a one-for-one. We had $1 million revenue drop-off and $1 million debt drop-off. The transfer to special aid fund, that's related to our local share of our special ed summer school costs. That money gets moved over to our federal fund where those expenses are recorded. Then transfer to capital. This is the piece we've seen in legislative proposals over the years to try to shift this dollar amount from $100,000 to $250,000 for the transfer to our capital fund to do a construction project up to that cost at one school building. It's still at $100,000. The plan is to continue along the flooring replacement at Northside and Dudley over the next several years, this to be specifically at Northside again. So it'll have 2 years in a row with work taking place at Northside to try to continue through the hallways to replace the flooring. So just to summarize the total between instruction, general support, transportation, community service, and our debt service and benefits, it's a total increase of about $5.9 million or 3.71% increase to the budget. Just to highlight, a couple quick pieces in terms of facts for the budget. Most of that is all of that is related to salaries and benefits. There are some other pieces with the debt and some items that drop and have slight increases. However, the benefits are about 66% of that increase, and then salaries are about 34% of that increase. So it works out to be about $5.9 million between the two. So as we work through the budget process, trying to keep other areas continued to be level. Increases where we saw cost increases in the market that we are subject to pay is where we would see increases throughout the budget. So how do we support the expense side of the budget? That's the other side, the revenue. So revenue, we'll go over the different types of revenue the district receives: property tax, state aid, sales tax, and then other revenues such as charges for services, facility use, admissions, interest earnings, which is the use of money and property, and then reserves and fund balance to support any revenue shortage as a whole. Won't spend a lot of time on this, but again, the 2% tax cap still in place. There's a formula. We'll take a look at how it works out for us for 2025-26. Here's some historical information related to the budget, levy, and tax rate. We talked about this, I believe, in the under the hood process and looking at our historical information. You can see for the most part over the years, the tax levy increase has been greater than the tax rate increase, and that's because we've seen growth in the tax base over the years, with the exception of 2024-25. We actually saw a reduction in the tax base, and that's mostly related to the equalization rate, which essentially is the level of assessment compared to the expected market value of the property. The state determines equalization rates for townships across the state, and the town of Perrington is now at about a 61% or 62% equalization rate, meaning its homes are underassessed per market value by about 38%. So with that, we've seen some commercial property is not assessed the same as residential property, so we've seen some drops in tax base related to commercial property as it relates to that equalization rate. Here's a look at the tax levy limit calculation for 25-26. Basically, this is the long formula. We start with the prior year tax levy, the tax base growth factor. That is the growth of the tax base of the prior year in the town of Perrington. So anything greater than 1, I mean, there was a slight growth in that prior year. So here you see the multiplier at 1.0046. I would anticipate that to be smaller in any years where we see the tax base drop, but this is the number for determining this tax levy limit. We add in pilots received in 24-25 and subtract out the prior year exemptions to get our adjusted levy. The 1.02, the allowable levy growth factor, is the lesser of 2% or the consumer price index. So therefore, if CPI grows at 4%, this is where you see the cap at 2%. If CPI growth is less than 2%, that number will be less than 1.02 for the multiplier. So can be challenging in times when CPI has a large growth. We're limited to that growth factor within the calculation. Then we subtract out the pilots coming up in the budget for 25-26 and add in the capital exclusions for 25-26. And those capital exclusions are related to our local share of debt service on capital improvement projects, as well as the local share of bus purchases, capital equipment, the buses themselves, and finally, when they put the guidance in the legislation regarding any BOCES capital improvement projects, we are exempt the local share of any BOCES projects as well. So the cost for BOCES less the aid the school district gets for that goes into this calculation. And there are no pension exclusions for 25-26 because the growth in those rates is less than 2%. So here we can raise $90.3 million at a growth percentage of 2.98%. Now to give a quick summary on the governor's executive budget proposal. Overall, a $1.7 billion increase to school aid translates to Fairport on the foundation aid side, and then as we look at the expense-based aids, no formula changes proposed for those pieces. A $1.46 billion increase in foundation aid. Of that $1.7 billion increase, with a due minimum increase for school districts of 2%. So essentially protecting some school districts of which the formula may not drive larger than a 2% increase, then we would get at least a minimum of 2%, or would not drive at least 2%. So actually Fairport did benefit from this because our increase would have been under $200,000 had it been driven through the formula. Instead, we'll be receiving about, I can't see from here. It nets out to a little over $400,000 budget to budget as a whole for the school district. Because when the budget was finalized in the prior year, there were some formula changes that went into place to where our budget for foundation aid in 2024-25 was slightly greater than what the foundation aid actually came in at in April of last year. And then our expense-based aids, transportation, BOCES, building aid, excess cost, which is the both for private and public placements for students with special needs, and instructional material aid such as textbook, hardware, software, and library materials. Those formulas, no proposed changes to the formulas themselves. And then you can see overall we will have a decrease in the expense-based aids, but those, again, primarily related to the building aid, the $1 million decrease there. We have a $400,000 decrease which was budgeted for a grant through the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York for the purchase of one zero-emission bus in 24-25. So that was a one-time revenue in that year. And then looking at our tuition aid, we proposed a decrease by about $100,000 based on our historical revenue we've seen started to flow in on those pieces. So overall, between the foundation aid and expense-based aids, it'll be a slight decrease we'll see in state aid. Again, we had that corresponding decrease on the expense side for the debt. So here's a quick summary of the dollars themselves. Again, $490,000 increase in foundation aid, budget to budget, a decrease in the transportation BOCES building aid, and then excess cost aids projected to remain the same, and then aidable materials and tuition aid and other. That's where you see the $100,000 decrease in tuition aid and the $400,000 decrease in the bus grant from 2024-25. And then our applicable aid ratios down at the bottom in terms of how does money flow into the school district in terms of our expenses. And those are the formulas for these expense-driven aids. The money spent in 24-25 will drive the revenue in 25-26. So again, an overall decrease of approximately $1 million in the state aid revenue budget. Here's just a history of foundation aid. I always feel like this is a little bit important to kind of highlight. We had some years where we were underfunded. School districts were underfunded according to the foundation aid formula and what was in law, which is why you see a large increase over a 3-year period in this line graph, because foundation aid was committed to be fully phased in over a 3-year period. So from 2021 through 2024, those 3 years, we saw large increases in foundation aid until we became fully phased in per the formula. And since then, we expect to see slight increases as a whole, depending on how the final budget ends up getting approved. Again, next year, the 2% is what's reflected here in 25-26. So total revenue, adding in our property tax pieces and state aid and other revenue, about a $2.4 million increase. Most of that increase is related to the property tax. We have the decrease in state aid, did increase budget as it pertains to sales tax and other revenues such as interest earnings. We've been fortunate to see higher interest rates. However, also need to be mindful that at one point in time, rates were under 1%, right, in the past 10 years since I've been here. And in those years, interest earnings were extremely low. So as we're adjusting for interest earnings in 25-26, just being cognizant as we look at long-range planning as a whole, what does that mean for future years if we see rates start to drop as a whole? So just keeping that in mind, and that's what we do when we're working through these pieces, is just try to educate and understand what those numbers could look like in the future. So about $2.4 million increase in revenue, again, as a whole there. Now to talk about So if you remember, the expense side of the budget was up about 5.9 million. Now we saw about a $2.4 million increase in revenue. So how does the balance get funded as a whole in the district? So here we have the assigned appropriated fund balance. Those are surplus monies left over from the existing budget year that we appropriate and assign to support any revenue shortage in the following fiscal year. It's a great ability to be able to fund it, but keeping in mind the 25-26 budget ending in June of 26 will determine how much is available to continue to support that $4.9 million. So something to just keep in mind as we go through the budget and adjust any revenues or expenses. How do we continue to support that $4.9 million? And that's just a key piece overall in the budgeting process. Transfer from debt service fund. This is primarily related to premiums received on short-term bond anticipation notes coming back in to pay the interest, coupled with any additional funds that we have utilized to support our existing debt. So trying to help support oncoming debt to minimize the impact as a whole as we look at the planning for long range. And then tax tertiary reserve and our unemployment and retirement contribution reserve. These are three reserves that may be budgeted to support operating expenses. We've kept pretty stable with the tax tertiary and unemployment over the years, budgeting the 20,000 and 60,000, only utilizing if we truly had to. The amount that can be pulled out of here, in theory, would support the actual expenses that are taking place in the general fund. Unemployment also could be utilized to support any budget management as a whole, as we've worked with our auditors in terms of how that can support our expenses as we're going year to year. And then the ERS and TRS, those two reserves supporting the pension system payments that we have as a district. So right now, the increase is only related to the slight change in the debt service fund revenue itself, remaining at the $8.7 million approximately for 25-26. Now, what does this mean when we add all the numbers up and look at the expenses, revenues, and fund balance to this point in the budget development process at the first draft? So overall, we take the $165.7 million budget, subtract out the revenues of $153 million, subtract the debt service fund money and the assigned fund balance, reserves, and that brings us to right now where we stand as a revenue shortage, about $3.5 million. The percent of budget, we keep that down below just to continue to monitor how much of the reserves and fund balance we're assigning as a percent of budget. Obviously, as budget grows, if we're remaining the same in terms of our assigned fund balance and reserves, that percentage will start to drop a little bit. If we're increasing slightly, it kind of just could stay similar. We've tried to stay in that 3 to 4.5% range over the years. We jumped up to 5% in 24-25 to just support the budget as a whole, and we had that review as we went through the process and understood that with our long-range planning. So that was all educated decision as we went through that development for 24-25. So right now where we are in the process, again, is the $3.489 million shortage in revenue to support the expense side. And then here's just a pie graph with a quick summary of the revenues. So it just kind of shows those percentages as a whole. Most of our revenue coming from property tax and state aid. With a cap on the property tax piece, only able to drive that additional $2.4 million in that side of it. And then the state aid is pretty much limited to that foundation aid increase. We did have some additional pilots, not additional pilots, we had pilots as they age through the length of time that a property spent on a payment in lieu of tax agreement, their percent cost goes up a little bit each year. So that's why we see the increase in the pilot overall. So next, you want me to run through?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a pause, right? And I think it's a pause to have a little conversation. And we want to invite you into this conversation. We appreciate you taking it all in. But the essence of where we are is 3 in a $500 million gap, right? And we want to have a conversation with you about potential budget gap management strategies. And I'm highlighting, emphasizing the word potential. We feel confident that we can continue to move through this budget process, continue to meet the community's expectations, also be fiscally responsible and sustainable for the future. And I want to open up the floor to some questions. And, we have a list of potential strategies that we are offering up for a conversation, because I know that, the board wants to make sure that we're, meeting the community's expectations, not only programmatically, but also fiscally, so.
Well, am on Audit and Finance Committee, we do a bit of a deeper dive looking into the line items in the budget and where there might be, opportunities to save. And, I know we'll have more discussions about this going forward, but, my main takeaway or thought is that it's why we kind of have those priorities when we set the budget. Because when you have a, $3.5 million gap, well, where are you going to find those savings? And you have to have really concrete priorities to know where you're gonna be looking. So I think that'll help guide us.
We talked about the use of reserves and the benefits of using reserves and giving it back to the community in moments like this, again, because I think you did a great job explaining, what's happening in the world of healthcare and how we're experiencing not just a Fairport thing, but throughout the county experiencing an increase. So
I think that, one of the things that we've talked about as a board with that is keeping in mind that that is very much a balancing act about short-term versus long-term when it comes to using reserves, and that they're a finite resource, and we can't, using them is good, and Rich has been an advocate for that, and I do agree with that, but combining that with long-term conversations to make sure that
It's not
we can't rely on these reserves if healthcare costs continue to rise at the rate that they are, which.
And that was one of my questions, I know, during the workshop, we're thinking that next year the healthcare won't.
We don't want to make a projection.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
so if we knew that, we would definitely
Right.
write the book. But again, we've seen trends like this in the past.
Right.
Right.
So from past experiences.
But again, as we know more and enter another budget season, right, we'll be able to give more clarity. But
And just to touch on that point as well as Brian's, I mean, something we talked about in Audit and Finance Committee is that, well, what does the reserve really do for you? It buys you some time. I mean, that's really it, right? It means that you don't have to figure out how to reduce spending immediately. It gives you a little bit of a cushion, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to reduce it, because those costs are not going to drop to zero, right? They're going to continue.
Talk me through the tax cap override. So right now, the concern with using the reserves is it's finite. If we go out and ask for a tax cap above
generate more revenue,
does that gets us out of next year needing to rely on that as reserve money, correct?
Yeah, so again, just an option, right? Just to kind of throw information in where, in terms of balancing any budget, the buckets are expense, revenue, and reserves fund balance, right? Those are the three buckets. So on the revenue side, the main area to generate additional revenue would be the tax levy, and that would be over proposing an override, or anything greater than that tax levy limit increase would require a 60% approval by voters. So that would generate additional revenue for the district in any year if they chose to propose that.
Ballpark, what would our percent we'd go out at be?
1% drives about 870,000. So it would have to be 5, 8, another 4%, greater than 4% more. On top of that, yep, yeah. So I just took 3.5 divided by about 800. And that's, yeah.
So go up to 6.98.
Right, which I don't think we'd get 60% of the vote with it.
Right, and again, these are, again, just,
No, I'm just
but yeah, that's why we're doing
talking
this.
through it and saying to the community, like, this healthcare cost hit us. I don't know that we could get the 60%, and is it better to use the reserves?
But I think, again, looking at like what are reserves, when we get to the end of the year and we have surplus and people are saying, why do you have so much surplus? And we say, well, we put it in reserves for when something unexpected happens, like a 14, 15% increase in health benefits. So that's what they are there for. But with that idea of, you know, Inflation Reduction Act is still rolling out, there could still be future impacts. So
Yeah,
knowing we
I
need to
think
tighten
I
the belt
would.
a little.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously worth discussing it and understanding it. I personally would probably have a bit of a problem with not utilizing the reserve for this situation and going for a big, tax increase.
That would be huge.
Yeah.
So, I think, go ahead.
No, I just, more a point of information. I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Stevenson in his final presentation for us. But in the one house bills, they were proposing higher increases in foundation aid. Now it's going to meet somewhere. We can't count on increased money. But yes, fingers crossed and knocking on wood that there might that revenue might. I mean, it's not going to be $3.4 million additional,
but it could help, right?
It could help. Yes. Yeah.
So that's why I say this is a budget process, and this is where we are today, March 18th, and it's good to have this conversation. But I also, it's interesting, and I appreciate what you were saying, Brian, about have caution. They're there, but we need to have caution because we continue to rely on them. I think that's what you were saying. That over reliance on that depletes the reserves,
right?
And then we're in a real cycle. But being caught up in that cycle and having awareness about it, I think, is the first part of making sure that we're being thoughtful and prudent, and having a way to move through this. Maybe it's relying on revenues. Maybe it's looking at our non-instructional expenditures even further. Maybe it's having a disciplined approach to class sizes, continuing that, moving forward. Like, not in the past, we might have projected too soon and added a staff based upon a premature projection. So, but we're going to hold off on that just based upon where we are. And, the class sizes and what we're settling in at right now, unless there's a mandated program, we're going to pretty much stay the course. And over the next several weeks, until we get to, I think, believe April 8th, we'll have another public conversation, and hopefully we'll have information from the final budget, and we'll be able to put those numbers together, and then we'll be able to see. And I'm hearing reserve utilization, right, is a way to move forward as we balance the budget. Jan?
I was thinking back to our conversation in audit and finance. While like using reserves is certainly one means, where are other ways that the district might look to be more disciplined?
So again, speaking.
Aside, and actually, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you. Aside from looking at staffing, I think because that's our instructional. Like, what might be, where could we be more disciplined in non-instructional?
That's what I was saying, the non-instructional pieces, and I don't, I don't want to get into line items here, but at the same time, we have to be careful as well because we have that assigned fund balance as well, and we need to make sure that we're able to meet that assigned fund balance, and we don't want to add to that because that's even more deficit spending. So we just need to take a look at from a non-instructional lens where that would fall. Programs that we were thinking to initiate that may have been in this budget, that might be something that we might have to forego. So those are pieces that we'll narrow down as we move forward. Equipment money, like the amount of desks, that we purchase. I'm just giving you an example. Equipment, maybe maintenance on trucks, and moving those down the road, if you will. So
moving down the road.
So I said that, if you will.
We also dropped out. If you remember the non-instructional budget, we were reflecting the building condition survey costs. So looking at current year funds and trying to allocate current year funds to get that,
Is
that service put into place.
I was gonna say, is that something we can get the purchase order and like get
And-
that set up?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, those are pieces to help manage the increase in next year's budget. That's a once every 5-year deal, so that is a blip.
So I appreciate that question because it comes back to like, 70%, 72% of our organization, what people, that's what makes us great. That's what makes all the wonderful things come to fruition. When we talk about our class sizes, when we talk about the amount of electives, when we talk about all the things that we're able to offer, that's people. When it talks about all the great things we're doing at the elementary school, when it talks about the professional learning and the MPSS, right? So we need to do all we can to safeguard that, and using the reserves and being prudent and having a disciplined approach moving forward. I think we can move through this.
What makes it seems to be that using the reserves does make a greater impact. I think like when people think of like their household budgets, they like, well, we'll take a little bit from here, a little bit from here, a little bit from here. But thinking about right, like I think that's kind of what community members think of. Well, like we won't go out to eat once a week, or we're gonna. And I think it seems to be that that's the difference in budgets, that you can make smaller changes with your household budget that might make a bigger impact. But just from other conversations we've had, it doesn't seem like those small moves, like 1,000 here, 1,000 here, makes the same type of impact. Feel free to correct me if I'm totally wrong. They're not for one-for-ones.
Right, and you take a look, I mean, all of our facilities, and I talked about the number of facilities, the square feet, lawns still need to be mowed. There's heating and cooling, and there's paving, and oh, by the way, how many times have I text messaged you this year about, water mains and issues that occur, right? Those things happen. So your question is the right question, and it's really hard to go and get those things because now you're going to be deteriorating the functionality of the infrastructure, right? So it's a balanced approach, and I do think that we can look at our non-instructional pieces like you're asking and make this budget a reality. But I think we need to be thoughtful
Right.
as we move forward.
And there were some things that we had hoped to do next year that, we can put on pause.
And I think those goals are incredibly important because as we go back to the office and talk as a team, we're gonna make sure that we protect board priorities that are expressed in the goals, and I won't go over them again, but and I will communicate this to the staff as well that having a disciplined approach moving forward, we see a way through this, but we need to be thoughtful, and I think your prudence about the use of reserves, but also expectation to use them because that's why they're there, and I think that's what the comptroller would say as well. They're there for this moment in time.
Yep. And then to relate Jan's point about like personal budgeting, I mean, it's kind of like when you go after some of your lower cost but scalable items, right? Am I doubling up on subscriptions, or do I really need this? That's not going to get you there, but you kind of need to go through that exercise just to then reduce the burden that goes to reserves and then other longer term, more high impact reductions, right? It's a lot of what we talked about in Audit and Finance Committee.
We did during the anticipating budget as a whole, we did do a 5% reduction to school buildings in terms of their supply budgets, their equipment. So it was a little that, right, if had not been done, it would add just to that number. So there are pieces, you're absolutely right, that we do look at even equipment areas. If there's something we can reduce there and go without, those are other areas that
I want to emphasize, we see a path forward, right? This is not, a panic. This is, we've planned, and this is previous boards have had expectations of, make sure we're maintaining reserves and, appropriating them for moments just like this. So thank you.
And thanks for the lead-in.
Yeah.
Could I ask a quick question on revenue? If we look at the pie chart, you might need to come back to this one if we don't have the answer offhand, but there's been a lot of discussion just in light of the current environment in the community about the federal sources of funding. And I actually thought it was more like 2% of the overall budget. So like, does federal fall within one of these categories, or is it really just that?
That's just really the federal Medicaid piece that
Yeah.
would fall in here is operating revenue. The other portion that you're thinking about, I think that you're thinking about,
Yeah.
is related to title grants.
Yeah, right.
The funding for IDEA, the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, which is 611 regular school day, and then 619 for preschool. Those are recorded in our federal aid fund or the special aid fund. That's what school districts have to record those. So those are not.
They're not considered
pieces in
revenue
the
for
general
this
fund.
discussion.
However, they do support some staffing. So for example, Title I funding supports ELA and math specialists salaries within our budget. IDEA supports special ed, some clerical support, psychologists. So there are some pieces that it supports school districts on. So we're obviously mindful of those pieces as well in terms of development, knowing that those grants are supporting our programs.
Yeah.
Just not reflected here.
Yeah, and I thought it was just important to know, because someone might look at this and say, well, it's not a factor at all, but it actually is a factor. So.
Yes, it is a factor.
Have we looked in terms of what that would look like for us if something did happen federally with the grants?
So we've had initial conversations, and there's pieces in, again, our general fund that we're protecting that.
Yeah. Okay.
But our grant allocation for our Title I, Title II, Title III is probably $700,000 of our total budget, which is a significant amount of money. However, some districts rely on them much more, right? And the special ed pieces that we've talked about in the past as well, those are over a million, right? So, we understand what's at stake when people have concerns. We have no knowledge or inclination that those are impacted at this point in time. But I do think that there is some budget protection to make sure that we can support programming.
And Monroe County School Board, they are requesting information from districts. I know we talked to Brett about this today. Yeah, you shared it with us today. Anyway, our local federal legislators, congressmen and senators are looking for that kind of information from districts and gathering it, and what's needed and what's gonna be missed. How can they help? So I know you shared that information. I know we'll share it, but kind of countywide and statewide, our legislative leaders are paying attention to that and trying to figure out what's needed around here. Maybe not just for us,
right,
budgetarily, but on a big picture.
Right. And speaking of reserves, I know the board, and just move us along here, the board was wanting us to talk a little bit more about reserve and reserve utilization. So Mr. Stevens is going to spend some time, take a look down memory lane of how we've used reserves. And
I thought we were at this. That sounded like a great
Yes,
spot.
right.
very nostalgic now.
Yep. Oh, sure.
No.
Yeah.
Well, both.
So again, reserve funds here, right? Prudent to have reserve funds for a variety of different pieces. We'll go through each of the reserve funds and the balances as of June 30th, 24, as a refresh on the next few slides here. Again, comptroller's guidance is, right, planning ahead. That's important, and that's what we continue to try to do, whether it be a capital improvement project or our operating budget as a whole. So here, starting first with capital reserves, these are established by voter approval and restricted for capital purposes. And here you can see the different capital reserves we have. We have the capital project reserve, has had about 15.6 million in it year end. We have the two tech reserves, one of which is older that may no longer be funded, and the other reserve just created in 22 so that some funding could be put into place over the next several years. And that meets any of our, we try to balance that off of kind of one-off replacement needs that we have. Any of these have to go to voter proposition to spend the funds as well. So voter approval to create it, then we may fund at the end of a school year through the year-end process of fund balance review, and then to spend has to be voter approved as well. And then our two bus reserves, one from 2002, those funds, the 680, if you remember, we had 3 buses approved to be purchased in 24-25 with the use of those funds essentially. So that at year end will show pretty much depleted for the most part for the total cost on those. And then the new bus reserve of 729,000 was recently created in 24, and we put some funding in there, of which there will be a proposition to utilize some funds out of that to support the purchase of one bus. Next few reserves are repair reserve, cost of doing any emergency repairs. So if we do not have funds in the general fund to support any emergency repair that will come up, the district may utilize these funds here. It does require a public hearing to use the funds and not have to replenish them. If the funds are pulled out without a public hearing, then the district has to pay monies back into that reserve for what was used in order to get it back to where it was before. And I believe there may even be some interest requirements of payback to get money back in. So it doesn't take much to do a public hearing, would be the recommended approach on that. And those funds cannot drive building aid or any of those pieces, so they're there for any emergencies. Employee benefit accrued liability reserve. This is for compensated absences, so essentially any vacation payouts that would take place annually, or payouts upon retirement or resignation that the district has to pay out per contracts, or benefit sheet agreements. Funds may be used to pay for those pieces. And then tax certiorari liability and insurance reserve, specifically for unanticipated unbudgeted expenses in those particular areas. And next, the board authorized reserves. These are the primary operating type reserves that we see that can support the larger expenses. So we have the two pension system reserves, 9.1 million in ERS, 4.9 in TRS. The TRS reserve is capped at funding. So as of June of 24, we had the maximum amount in there that we're able to have. We'll then do the recalculation based on prior year salaries and the percent that may be in there as a whole to see if there's any additional funding that could go into that reserve. And then unemployment and workers' comp. We recently established workers' compensation reserve a few years back. Again, looking long range and how can this planning help us support future budget gaps that could be seen in the future. If we remember, a big piece of our planning, we have funded some of these reserves in the past. We'll show that on the next few slides. But I talked earlier about the foundation aid phase-in. We also had the stimulus money that essentially provided us over $9 million of funding that went away after 3 years. So, over the years, in the 24-25 budget, we absorbed some of those costs without that funding as it ended in 23-24, and then with some of our planning of having the reserves in place. So this is a little small. It's 10 years of data on here, but essentially what you're looking at are the reserves that we mostly have seen in the budget in terms of how those have been budgeted, and then looking at those operating reserves as a whole, being the workers' compensation, unemployment, and the two pension systems. And then again, I have the tax certiorari because we've continued to have that in the budget, that 20,000. So here you see the budget, the expense, and additions and interest. So those would be funding plus any interest earned in the reserve itself. So back in 14-15, 15-16, you can see that the district was spending out of a couple of these reserves, mostly the pension system reserve as a whole, to support any costs that need to be supported, based on that year's budget development piece. And
that was back during the real dip in foundation
that was
aid, right?
The gap elimination adjustment was in place way back then. We were seeing sometimes some smaller restoration of that foundation aid shortage that we were seeing as school districts. So essentially what they were starting to do is restore some of our aid in a year-to-year process. Could have been small, could have been large, depending on the year in terms of what they chose to restore back in that year. It didn't all come back in that 1 year, because that's when you saw that foundation aid phase in from 21 through 24 take place. In 16-17, you can see we did a slight reduction in the budget in terms of what we were budgeting for ERS, trying to, kind of lower what the reliance was there on that side. Our expenses came in around 27,000, and you can see additions and interest of 1.4 million. So this is when you started to see us able to fund. Yes, we had expenses out of a couple of reserves, but overall the net between those and the funding shows that surplus in that particular year. And then 17-18, again, two small pieces, mostly interest, primarily interest earnings in the additions piece. When you see those smaller numbers, those are the additions there. From 18-19 to 20-21, we had some expense in 18-19, mostly related to the employees retirement system reserve of moving funds into the teacher retirement system reserve. That was the first year we were able to start funding that reserve. So we reallocated some funds from one reserve to the next. And then in 19-20, this was, if you remember, 19-20, March was when COVID started. So we did see some savings in that particular year and some expenses through year end. We were shut down for over 3 months. So we did have a surplus at year end in 19-20. And again, you can see those monies went into the reserves, knowing in our minds that something down the road, these funds could be utilized for. Then 2021, we had some additions in these reserves of $1 million. Important to note, I'm only showing the operating ones. You could always look at the year-end audits to look at any capital reserve funding. Those would be separate, but just to show the operating ones here. And then 2021, 22 through 2024, 25. These 3 years will highlight the years of the stimulus funding and the foundation aid phase-in. So here you see some the budget numbers and not having to utilize the reserves primarily because we had that stimulus funding support and we had the phase in the foundation aid. So we're able to fund some reserves in those years through 23-24. And here you can see 24-25, just the budget figures themselves. Year end of 24-25 will determine any ability to fund reserves depending on decisions made by the board at year end in terms of allocation of any surplus funds.
So Matt, if I'm reading these right, we have not been spending out of these reserves except really since we create for
15, 16
during the dark times of foundation aid.
Yep.
Okay.
Correct. Yep. So that's
good historical context, I think.
I was saying since I've joined the board, it hasn't been talked about, which.
Yep. So what we do in our long-range planning when we look at the fund balance and reserves is we take a look and we say each year we're adjusting right for the budget piece, and then if we continue at the current level, what year do we expect those reserves to be depleted? And then we true up each year, right? So depending on where year end fell, we then true up that projection in future years.
Can you just remind me if we're spending out of operating reserves, does that require a proposition, like a voter proposition, only out of capital reserves?
Only the capital reserves, correct. Yeah, so like the tech, the capital building reserve, those are for specific purposes, right? So the capital building reserves are for capital improvement projects. The tech would be us looking at what are some one-time expenses that wouldn't be a recurring reliance that would have to be budgeted for each year and do that out of the tech
which we use
reserve.
use
we've done that. And then we did that a couple years back where we had about 1.5 million approved. We knew that was going to drive BOCES aid the following year, and that's how we were able to get the tech reserve. The plan was to keep that tech reserve to a point where we could support those one-time expenses. So if we had to reduce some pieces in the budget, that could be a proposition down the road. So that just provides the context of those operating reserves in terms of where we've been over the years, and then just trying to understand some of those pieces that allowed us to not have to use those reserves were some short-term funding pieces that were available to school districts. So any questions on the reserve pieces before I just jump to the
back to the presentation?
Back to the presentation.
Sorry, that was really helpful. Thanks for digging that up for us.
You got it. You're welcome. Talked earlier about the voter proposition. Again, this would be expected to be on the ballot this time in March is when any voter propositions need to be approved for resolution to meet that 45-day publication notice to be on the ballot at the May vote. So this would support the purchase of one large bus. And there's the language people would see on the ballot. And then I'll turn it back over to Mr. Provenzano to talk timeline. So thanks for thank you for engaging in the presentation.
Good job, Matt.
Thanks.
As usual. Let's give him a yes. I was gonna say sort of sudden.
Yeah, I know.
Here we are, March 18th. There's one date that's missing here. It's April 8th, which will be another session where we'll talk about the budget again at a workshop. And pretty much, hopefully, we'll have all the information we need from the governor's state final budget. And then we will, hopefully, and then we'll hopefully have a conversation on how we're going to manage the gap that we talked about, which I feel confident we can move forward doing. And then April 22nd, presentation of the total budget and final draft with the adoption and a public hearing on May 6th. And on May 20th, budget vote and board elections will be 2 seats up for election. That election will take place at Joanna Perrin Middle School in the gymnasium from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. More interactions and opportunities. Thank you for your engagement and support.
Brett. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to the rest of our agenda. Okay, so I need a motion to approve the form of the notice annual meeting, budget vote, and election. In the form attached hereto and authorizes the district clerk to publish and post such notice in the manner provided by law, which is what we were just talking about.
So moved. Second.
Mary Caitlin, Brian, discussion, all in favor? Aye. 6-0. Okay, be it resolved that the following proposition be submitted to voters of the district at a meeting to be held on May 20th, 2025 as attached.
So moved.
Lisa,
Second.
Brian, discussion?
Just a quick question, just in case there was any confusion. This is a diesel bus. This is not an electric bus, correct?
Correct.
You are correct. Yep. Even the cost of diesel buses has gone up. Any other? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 6-0. It's my favorite word. We need a motion to adopt the resolution for a proposed capital outlay project at Northside Elementary School pursuant to the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act as attached.
So moved.
Second.
Brian, Lisa, the word seeker is in there. I always think of Harry Potter. Any discussion?
This is finishing the terrazzo
It
floor.
is. I don't think it's finishing it.
Not finishing. This
Adding.
is continuing.
Yes.
Continuing.
It's down the yellow brick
steps.
road.
Yeah, there's
Baby steps.
literally.
Somewhere Aaron Moretta is doing a happy dance.
Oh, I'm
right?
sure. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 6-0.
The golden snitches quick any SED approval.
Yes. I need a motion that the Board of Education adopts the Audit and Finance Committee charter as attached.
So moved.
Lisa. Second. Mary Caitlin. All in favor? Aye. I would need a motion that the board approve the attached resolution to authorize RIC 1 Operations Center to negotiate data privacy agreements with vendors and third-party contractors on behalf of Fairport Central School District.
Moved.
Brian? Rich? Discussion?
I appreciate the district's work on this. I know it's been a lot to get into, but this I feel like gives us that added layer of protection with the Ed 2D laws and strengthens our negotiating with different companies. So I appreciate all your work on this.
Same. All in favor? Aye, 6-0. Field trips, motion that the board approves the attached field trip requests.
So moved.
Lisa? Rich? Comments?
This
Oh.
looks wonderful.
I agree. And you could always look at this online, so. All in favor?
Aye.
6-0. We are retiring some policies, so I need a motion that the board approve the retiring of the following policy 8131.
So moved.
Brian, Lisa?
So just a quick explanation, we just adopted this one, so this might be the fastest adoption to retirement. But with some of the changes at the federal level, this coverage for Title IX protections is moved now back under the equal educational opportunity policy, and is no longer recommended to be its own standalone policy. So that's why it's being retired.
All in favor? Aye. 6-0. Okay, we do have some policy second reads, so I need a motion that the Board of Ed approve the second readings of the policies attached below. Mary Caitlin?
Second.
Brian? All in favor? Aye. 6-0. Donations, always a great thing. I need a motion that the Board of Education approves the following grants and donations.
So moved.
Brian?
Second.
Lisa, any comments? Just thank you to those that did. Yeah, there's some really amazing things donated here, so thank you. All in favor? Aye. 6-0.
Someone also had a question about the pavilions.
Oh, sure.
Jefferson Avenue will be getting a pavilion. I think somebody was asking.
Oh,
We
stop
were
it.
asking. Are you serious? Wow.
Have we,
That's not part of this one yet, but
Brian made the joke the other day, but in all seriousness, have we checked with the PTA if they could work on that 3.5? They are just absolutely amazing.
Yes. Wow. Okay. Well, excited for that to be on probably the next one.
They didn't want to be left out.
Okay. We move on to personnel. So instructional, I need a motion to approve the following instructional staff actions as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
So moved.
Lisa?
Second.
Brian, Rich, sorry. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. 6-0. I need a motion to approve the following non-instructional and civil service staff actions as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
So moved.
Rich?
Second.
Lisa? Comments? All in favor? Aye. 6-0. Need a motion to approve the following athletic staff actions as recommended by the superintendent of schools.
So moved.
Lisa? Rich? All in favor? Aye. 6-0. Which brings us to our consent calendar. And I need a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Rich? Second. Mary Caitlin? All in favor? Aye. 6-0. And I need a motion to enter into executive session for matters pertaining to negotiations with a particular bargaining unit. Invited to attend are the Assistant Superintendent of Business, Matt Stevens, also Assistant Superintendent of Business, Jeremy Nardone, and Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Doug Laff.
Second. Did we get a second?
You missed us.
I just wanted to add in and Superintendent Brett Provenzano.
I mean, it's kind of.
Yeah, I know.
Sure. Okay.
Brian, did you say yes? Someone else?
Brian and Lisa.
Lisa, okay.
I'm the one who wrote this.
All in favor? Aye. 6-0. So we'll be going into executive session. If you're viewing from home, we'll reconvene just to adjourn. So thanks for joining us on this marathon of an evening.
Gary.